There's two main, I
Yep.
guess, things that would revolve around. One is actually just Flyadeal's trajectory and the MRO within its operations, but then also integrating in that, as Pooja mentioned, is the first time MRO as a topic really is being brought to such a domain that usually doesn't see MRO as a subject matter. And I guess a little bit
Mm.
about why a place like the Dubai Airshow would be a good place to discuss MRO. And I guess a bit of your thoughts on the importance of that. I guess that's maybe a good place to start. We have our MRO session at the Dubai Airshow. Why do you think the Dubai Airshow as a platform is important to highlight things like MRO?
I think a couple of things. One, typically an air show is about supply. It's about new aircraft coming and order books and so forth. It's typically the cornerstone of an air show, isn't it? It's about the orders that come out of it and all the exciting stuff that comes with it, and that's perfectly understandable. But I think what bringing MRO into the mix means that the air show itself is more rounded. And what do I mean by that? There's one thing which is supply, but another thing which is to maintain. So, there is a huge question mark in the industry at the moment with regard to new aircraft coming in, but also the maintenance of those new aircraft and also existing fleets as well. And so the visibility, the priority, the importance, so to speak, of MRO has increased dramatically because we've got supply constraints, because we've got constraints really across the whole aviation business, but it predominantly has to do with being able to keep your fleet airborne. And so actually having the two coming together actually makes, in my mind, common sense.
And yeah, you speak about like the order books, and the order books sort of they're racking up and racking up. If you look at the amount of orders that are just wait,
Yeah,
like the people are waiting for their planes to arrive, it's
desperately.
mind blowing. It's mind blowing. I mean, you've diversified your fleet. You guys are now moving into the wide bodies as well. And as
Mm.
you move into the wide body space, especially with the operation that you run, that's just predominantly sort of same aircraft, narrow body. As you diversify into a fleet like that, what are some of the biggest risks that you see as an organization dipping its toes, and actually not just dipping its toes, but diving into the wide body space and introducing a new aircraft to your fleet? And how are you kind of planning to manage those risks?
Yeah, we're in the boat. We're in the same boat with everyone else. It's not just about new orders and delays and things moving to the right, but we're having to keep older fleets in our fleet. So older aircraft, our CEOs and so forth. And the 330s, as you spoke of, in terms of they start coming in less than 2 years. So we will see. You're more than welcome to join me. You'll see in hopefully, inshallah, the final assembly hall at Airbus in December of next year, a tail, a Flyadeal tail of the 330 Neo. So
Nice.
it's imminent. It's absolutely imminent. So we're doing a lot of work. We're actually in Airbus in Toulouse next week with regard to doing what we call ATCM, which is basically the final specification of the aircraft and so forth. So that's a huge amount of work. So I think one thing, the aircraft are actually quite common, the Airbus methodology, avionics and so forth, and how they approach building the aircraft. So it's a bigger aircraft, but effectively there's a lot of things that it shares in commonality with the 320. But it is a different aircraft, different engines, different wing, different fuselage, different interior, different everything in many aspects. And so we're having to get our heads around that, and also do a different mission set. These things are going to be flying 10 to 12 hours, not 1 to 2 hours between Jeddah and Riyadh. So all the support infrastructure around it, how we manage and maintain the aircraft is obviously something that we're still getting our head around, and we'll continue to do so until the aircraft is delivered and we put it into service and start bedding it down. So it's a huge step up for us in terms of how we operate it in the airline, that's for sure.
And speaking of that trajectory, I mean, Vision 2030 for Saudi and Flyadeal, a massive part of that vision moving forward. One of the cornerstones, as you mentioned, within the MRO space and keeping the aircraft like maintained, is getting those technical skills under the belt because these new aircraft are
Mm,
coming in. Now, when it comes to actually
mm,
producing that pipeline of talent that you think would be able to sustain what you're planning, is that something that Flyadeal as an organization is going to be pushing internally and actually directly training up staff in that domain, or is that something that more
mhm.
Saudi Technique and the external MROs are going to have to deal with? And yeah, how are you approaching that situation?
No, it's a good question. I think at the top level, if you want to look at macro, take the helicopter view, call it what you will, the country is about self-sufficiency.
Mm,
So it's about building a talent pool and capability within the kingdom to pretty well do everything from A to Z. So that's the overall as part of Vision 2030, and that's incredibly exciting. Number two is underpinning all of that is a whole range of government programs and so forth to train up local Saudis in technical skills and capabilities that weren't there before, or if they were in a relatively small number, and it was augmented by labor from overseas and so forth. So again, what we're seeing is a lot of investment by the government in its people, sending them overseas for training, sending them to colleges, what have you, or there are sponsored programs, and we participate in those, everything from pilots to technical colleges to what have you. So that's incredibly exciting. In terms of how we look at it, it's slightly different from a lot of other airlines because we're not standalone. We're part of the Saudi group, as you know, Mohammed. And so Saudi group is actually 9 companies. 2 of them are airlines, ourselves and Saudia. But then you alluded to Saudia Technic, which is investing billions in a maintenance and repair campus here in Jeddah, just literally a couple of minutes away from me.
MRO
It's
village, yeah.
massive. The village. It's absolutely massive, and that's progressively coming online, which is incredibly exciting as well. So we have that as a let's say a part of the family, so to speak, and so that's exciting. And then I think the final question is, you've got the national level, you've got the Saudia technical level, and then at our level, we're determining, and I think this comes to the crux of your question, we're trying to determine what is core to us and what is not. So a good example of that is engines. Look, the engine reliability issue for the new next gen engines, the Leaps, Pratt and Whitney's, we have Leaps, is well publicized. I'm not saying anything out of turn, but the engines don't last as long as they should on the wing. And we're having to, I think this year alone, we're having to do about 50 engine changes out of a fleet of 40 aircraft, which is very, very high. And it does come in swings and roundabouts. My point being, though, is we determined that actually we didn't want to outsource that capability. We wanted to have that capability internally to us. And so there's one example where we've gone, look, this is a critical function, maintenance and repair and operation function that we want, and we've internalized it. And what we're looking at is just on a case-by-case basis with that ecosystem. So you have Saudia Technic having great facilities coming online. You have our ability to also outsource work to other providers like Lufthansa Technic or Joramco in Jordan or what have you. And then there's the consideration as to what we think is absolutely core to keep our mission and our operation going as well. And that's evolving. It's not fixed. So at the moment, we do everything up to engine changes and major C checks and so forth are outsourced to other providers. And, we'll consider that in due time as well. But it's an interesting, everything is moving around. As an example, Ryanair is talking about having their own engine shop where they're repairing their own engines and everything because they think that's critical. That would have never been part of the LCC conversation only a couple of years ago. It is now for a lot of LCCs who are having issues just as we are and saying what is core to us and what do we need to do and what do we need to own versus what do we continue outsourcing.
Wow, and that those conversations, what are the real levers that just make you swing that decision? Is it the mainly cost? Is it that longevity? What actually would make that decision where you go, you know what, this needs to come in-house? What are the main parts of that decision?
Yeah, and a core LCC principle dictates, going back to the LCC Bible, or call it what you will, is that you strip out everything that is non-core to the business. That you ask yourself and say, look, I'm effectively an airline. What do I need to do to operate as an airline? What are the core things I need to do? And it's effectively just owning planes and having crew and flying the aircraft safely and what have you. I'm obviously. How should I say, shortening it down. There's more complexity to that. And what you're, exactly, oversimplifying. And what you're now saying is actually what is core to our business now is maintenance, repair, and operation capability. Because at the end of the day, the criticality is we don't make any money unless our aircraft are on the line and flying safely, and there's no faults and so forth. And you would say, well, what's wrong with the outsource model? And this is where we're coming into the bottlenecks that we see in the marketplace at the moment in terms of skill sets and spares and capability and so forth, that maybe the pendulum has swung too far for a lot of LCCs where it really didn't have any core technical capability and was completely reliant on third parties. And what they're finding is there's shortcomings in that. And for us, we're relatively okay, but obviously the market dictates. So if you go back to the engine issue, this is not going away in the next 3 to 5 years. You're kidding yourself if that's the case. And so, if we're doing an excessive amount of engine changes, just as everyone else is in the region, that makes you re-examine your business model, doesn't it? It's a fundamental change in your business model. It's
Mm.
not going away anytime soon, and therefore you have to reevaluate what you actually do, if that makes sense, and what therefore is core to your business. And so, from that perspective, do I think that we'll ever do heavy checks? No, I do not. Do I believe that up to a heavy check, we are doing more activities and so forth? Yes, I do. Do I believe we're going to be maintaining engines and stripping them down and so forth? No, I do not. But I think everything up to heavy is now, for us at the very least, a consideration. Other LCCs have certainly gone beyond that, and also full service carriers obviously are more accustomed to it. Lufthansa technically have complete capability in house to maintain their aircraft. So for us, it's everything up to the heavy C checks that we're considering at this moment in time. But I certainly know of other carriers. Ryanair, I gave an example before, that have gone beyond that and are talking about engine maintenance and other such things as well. And best of luck to them. I understand why they're doing that, but for us, that's not an issue at the moment.
I think especially with the partnerships that you described with the Saudi
Yeah,
Technique, etc., like that infrastructure is existent within the family. So, if you've got a
it's a
cousin that can
different
help you do
ecosystem.
something,
Hey, part of the family. You can't choose. You can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. But sometimes it works out okay. So we're in a different ecosystem than a lot of other airlines. And a lot of other airlines are standalone. They have no access to any of this. They don't have access to national support, as an
yeah,
example, which we
true.
do.
Yeah.
So we look at it slightly differently, and I think it's quite a favourable position for us, actually.
You got to leverage your unfair advantages. Absolutely. One of
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
unfair advantages coming up for all of us really is just data and the amount of data and digitalization that's taking place across the entire industry. From a MRO perspective for you, are there any areas that you see on the horizon when it comes to predictive maintenance and big data that actually, if you're going to be bringing all so much of it in-house, anything that you've seen that you think actually, if we get this bit right, it could completely transform the cost of our MRO and actually just the reliability of what we do and how we maintain our aircraft?
Yeah, I think, look, at the end of the day, and I'll give you some practical examples. I mean, the data's there. There's more than enough data. But basically, there's two things that you need to do. One, you need to synthesize that data, assess it. And the next thing is you need to act on it. You just need to act on it. A lot of talk, let's build a data lake, but there's actually
Yeah.
a lot of stuff you can do without
Yeah.
the jargon in the industry now. So I'll give you a practical example. I've spoken about the engine challenges we had, and I mandated to the team that I didn't want any aircraft grounded for the year, but especially I didn't want any aircraft grounded because of engine issues for our peak summer activities. So for us, that's effectively June through to September.
Mm.
Other competitors and other airlines have had aircraft grounded for long-term groundings and so forth. We've not had one long-term grounding due to engines for 2025. So inshallah that will continue. But a lot of it has to do with planning. So, you talk about data and you talk about how to go about these things. What we did do and what we have done is we've sat down with CFM because we have LEAP engines on our 320s, and have done exhaustive modeling that started at the start of the year to say, what did we need to do? And you're talking about predictive maintenance. What do we need to do in terms of how we cycle the fleet to make it through the peak, but also to match up in terms of spares availability and to make sure that Stephen's mantra of thou shalt not have a plane grounded, and we can get through to the end of the year with a reliable fleet and so forth as well. So I've never seen, to be quite frank, this level of detailed analysis and activity in a fleet that I've run before. And a lot of it has to do in terms of leveraging your partners. CFM has obviously data of all of their engines around the world, harsh environments, benign environments, all of this type of stuff. And we literally went through and mapped it out. Now, to date, inshallah, it's working. I haven't got an aircraft grounded long term. I've had a full fleet through the summer,
Wow.
and we continue to operate with a full fleet at this moment in time. And even then, when we won't have a full fleet, which comes November, December, we know about it, and we're planning about it, and we're moving around our network and our fleet to be able to accommodate that. So I don't think there's any. What I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, I don't think there's any magical star or something. It's all within our grasp. As I said, it's about the synthesis, the synthesis of the data and then acting on it. And I've actually seen that in practical purposes, at least for us. And the
Mm,
outcome, the demonstrable outcome of that is, as I said, we've been able to keep our fleet going and flying. Everyone has that access, but I think it's bringing the parties, the key parties together, working on that data to say, what does this actually mean for us? Then having the flexibility to move around to accommodate what the data is saying and planning against it. Always lead by data, and that's what we're doing.
that's beautiful. I think just the way you plan that out is like you set yourself a target, you set yourself a goal, and then you work backwards from there to say what
Yeah,
do we need to do to achieve that. And then when you have the beauty of the data in your back pocket, but also the time ahead to really just utilize the models to see what would make this work. How could we achieve this?
yeah, and some of it actually had increased costs. To be fair, Mohammed, I mean, we had to bring, as an example, we had to drop engines, and we brought maintenance forward. I mean, this is a common practice, to be fair, but we did a lot of it to bring forward just to give us that extra buffer. The other thing, which I didn't mention, to be frank, is obviously we work closely with the regulators, in this case GACA in Saudi Arabia, and we've actually had such transparency with them in terms of the operator, the OEM, and the regulator, that we
Wow.
personally have now had engine cycle rates increased on
Mm,
those engines over the past 6 months, which means the engines can stay on board on the aircraft longer, on the wing longer. We get more time frame out of the engine, and so forth, and we're able to then defer. So it's very, very fluid. But that's obviously a great positive. The last increment that we had was 300 cycles. Doesn't sound like much, but that buys you a couple of extra months on the airframe of the engine on the airframe, which no one else got. And again, it's that tri-party of the airline, the OEM, and GACA working together and sharing that data and planning accordingly and showing that the engine actually has greater durability than expected, and that we're well within safety parameters. And that's incredibly, that's an amazing outcome for us, and we continue to push for that.
what you just described there in terms of how you bring pieces of the puzzle together to achieve an outcome larger than
Mm.
itself. I think with the Middle East on the trajectory that it's on, right? It's got its eyes set on the stars and it wants to get there. Being able to make sure you have all the right people in the room to talk to each other about the problem and get somewhere seriously is, I think, one of the advantages that something like the Dubai Airshow allows for. It's like it's a meeting point. It's like it's a melting pot of all of these parties that could really come together to achieve something. But I'd love to
Mhm.
understand from your perspective, something like the Dubai Airshow, how critical is it to really shape the conversations for the region?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think number one, I'll go back to when I was, almost 30 years ago, Mohammed. I don't think you were born, but from my perspective, the thing that was beaten into me many years ago at Qantas and my early days at airlines and so forth is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And
That's
the
it. Yeah.
airline is, and you know this, the airline industry is such a small ecosystem that
Mhm.
typically it's only one or two degrees of separation. And
Mm.
if I don't know someone, I can call you, and you'll probably know someone who I need to get to have a conversation about something. So relationships in the industry, it goes without saying, absolutely key to get stuff done. Business, getting yourself out of issues, just getting advice, best practice. Everyone, we are a hyper competitive industry, but when it comes to safety and technology and so forth, we're all sharing ideas and concepts. It's all within our interest, as an example, to make sure that engines last longer than they currently do, and sharing wisdom and knowledge about that, as an example. If you then fast forward that and take that to the Dubai Air Show, I think there's two things to say. I think one, it's now one of the premier air shows globally. And so well done to Dubai Air Show for that. I think, obviously Farnborough and Paris Air Show have had a grip on things for many, many decades, but you now have an alternative in terms of the Dubai Air Show. So from that perspective, it has a global footprint or presence. So that is fantastic. And number two is the fact that it is that forum that I spoke of, that it brings people together, it builds that relationships. So I think adding in the MRO component is just, as I said, just a far more well-rounded air show. I think the organisers should be applauded for that, because again, you're matching supply with operations and keeping fleets in the air. And so our presence at the air show is really about it's shoulder to shoulder. It's speaking to everyone else, getting an understanding, getting a temperature of what's going on, getting an understanding of what's the latest and greatest, because sometimes it's just not on your radar, but someone's already done something over there. And just having those conversations and walking away with that one or two bright ideas to say, I think we can do things differently, or I've spoken to someone about a particular piece of equipment or whatever the case may be that could help us. And it's those type of little gems that you want to take away back to your operation and then hopefully implement and see results from. But also obviously equally and most importantly is that relationship piece of continuing to strengthen relationships, be it with OEMs, other airlines, new suppliers, you name it, to understand that and stay ahead of the curve.
You speak about sort of staying ahead of the curve, and I think when I was working at Heathrow Airport as an engineer, like on the graduate program, I think you were on the graduate program, Qantas. I was on the graduate program for
Mm,
Heathrow. You get a chance to
mm,
explore like all the different various parts of this puzzle. One thing I noticed about engineering though is no one cares about engineering until something's gone wrong, right? Like until something's gone wrong, no one actually asks what the engineers are doing. The thing about MRO though is that I think the industry's woken up to the fact that if we don't solve this thing, we are going to fall flat on our face because there
yep,
is a real bottleneck coming up when it comes to talent, when it comes to the skills, when it comes to the facilities.
yes.
And as you said, like the last thing you want, I remember getting on a train the other day to Manchester from London, and like, I was standing at the platform, and the announcement came on, bing bong, sorry, this train's gonna have to be cancelled because there's no
Mm,
train drivers. And my mind thought, what? When is that day gonna be where I'm standing at the gate of at the gate of the aircraft, and they go, "Bing bong, sorry, we ain't got someone to sign off this airplane, and we're gonna have to
yeah.
cancel that flight." And I was like, unless we do something now, that day is fast approaching. So being able to
Mm,
embed it into the conversations at such a stage, like you said, with the air show, and also highlighting the challenge that's ahead, so that the rest of the airline industry wakes up to the fact that okay, if we don't solve this, that's where the pinch is gonna come from.
yeah.
Embedding that into the conversation from now is such a critical part. So yeah, huge props to the Dubai Airshow for doing that.
Absolutely. And I think also don't forget that the Middle East is such a dynamic industry at the moment. You know, it's certainly one of the leading regions when we talk about aviation. Even if you just, and that can come across as various things. Order book. You know, the biggest order book in the world is sitting in the Middle East. The three Middle Eastern carriers have more wide bodies than the whole of North America, as an example, at the moment. And that's not taking into account the backlog that they've got in terms of aircraft coming in.
Yeah,
So you've got that going on. So incredibly dynamic region, huge amount of growth, and a lot of cutting edge stuff going on in this region as well. And then overlay that also with the fact that it's not a benign region. It's a difficult region to operate in terms of durability, reliability, because of all the reasons we know, sand, heat, and the
yeah,
challenges that we face every day. So I think from that perspective, that's sort of what excites me because when I'm going, I can speak to like-minded people who understand and appreciate the problems that we face, and sit there and go, you know what, I'm operating out of Kuwait, and I feel for you. I know what's going on, and so that conversation is good. You're not looking at someone who's saying, "I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean heat? You know, what are you talking about in terms of engines being a half-life of mine and everything? I don't understand." So that perspective as well is really important for us because we can have those conversations and people go, yeah, I get you. I feel your pain, and this is something that we can work on or what have you. So looking forward to it in the next couple of months.
wonderful. Two last questions. What
Hmm.
other unique things do you think Dubai Airshow brings that the likes of Farnborough or Paris don't?
I think I go back to just talking about the dynamism of the region. Um,
Mm,
why should we, as a region, go off to Paris or London when a lot of the activity is here in the region, be it order books, be it innovation, be it onboard product, be it strategy, all of these type of things is happening in this region. So why should we have to pack our bags and go somewhere else to congregate and to
mm,
celebrate that and to announce that and to collaborate? So that's why I think there's such an importance for an successful Dubai Air Show is that you know everything that we're excited about is in our backyard, so let's celebrate that accordingly and make sure that we have then that it's worthwhile of that. And I think that's where the Dubai Airshow comes in.
I love that. And one last question from me before we wrap up. I personally see you as across the aviation landscape in terms of executives, as somebody who's ahead of the curve from your personal brand online to all the other various things that you do. I always think that you've got something in your back pocket, an insight or a breakthrough, or an idea that if more people were to adopt, they'd probably see some success out of it. If you had to give people a teaser of what might come on stage that they can then take away and maybe apply, what sort of breakthroughs or insight should people look forward to from your session?
See, now you're trying to steal my crystal ball, and like you're making my retirement destiny though so much harder. I think, look, I'll be honest with you without giving the game away. I'm going to come at it at a different angle than I think most. Number one, there's too much hype. It's like blockchain 10 years ago. Blockchain's gonna fix everything,
Yeah.
and then it fizzled off and what have you. I don't think that's the case with AI, but there is a lot of hype. MIT paper that came out recently said that 90% of CEOs are saying they're not seeing any return on their investment in AI and so forth and what have you. But just take that as a starting point. Second thing is that I do personally believe it's the next industrial revolution. I still haven't got my head around exactly all the elements. If I did again, I wouldn't be speaking to you. I'd be selling a book somewhere or something. But it is the precursor to the next industrial revolution, just as the internet was the last one, just as the steam engine was 200 years ago, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The third thing is, we've spent, rather than rushing in over the past 2 years, just believing in the hype and then walking away disappointed like a bad Tinder date. What we've done is we've taken our time. We've taken our time and looked at a range of things. Number one, there's a lot of existing suppliers that we have that all of a sudden have become an AI company, and the hype around that. And it's like we've had to test and evaluate that and see if it's for real. Then we've had to deal with standalone companies that are also coming to us and saying we have nothing to do with aviation, but we're going to tell you how to run your airline with AI. Okay. I'm exaggerating, but you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So I think we've taken a lot of time, and we're kicking off now quite discrete projects across the business, everything from HR to maintenance and engineering to commercial to what have you, tangible, measurable activities, discrete projects, not trying to change the world, but in unison with all of them, actually stepping the business up to another level in terms of adoption and seeing fundamental change in terms of how we run the business, from business support to customer service to you name it. So, again, I don't want to get caught up in the AI wash, so to speak, but that's certainly something that I've become. I was a skeptic a year and a half ago to now a fully fledged supporter and promoter, but in a specific way without losing my head or losing our head, so to speak, in terms of all the noise, and trying to really see what we can drive out of it over the next year, just given there's been a lot of maturity in the space in the past 6 to 12 months alone. So I think watch this space. I hope to be able to announce a few things, particularly over the next 5 to 12 months, 6 to 12 months. I think the only other component that's particular to an LCC is in-flight connectivity. I think is booming across the board, and there's a lot of discussion around what that looks like and what the future of in-flight connectivity is. Should it be a universal right, just as drinking water is, and it's free no matter where you go, be it you're on the air, in the bus, on the subway, in your car, at home? I think that's a valid discussion to be had, and what we're now seeing. Starlink and Starlink-esque solutions coming online very, very quickly. Amazon, as an example, that's changing the landscape completely. You've got the incumbents which are stepping up their game, but you've also got the Amazons, the Starlinks of the world, etc., coming into that. And I think that's something that we're really focused on now as well, not just for the passenger experience, but for the operational side of the business as well. That the customer touch points then become seamless, because no matter where you are in the customer journey, you've got high-speed internet connectivity. And what could you do with that from a customer facing and a back end perspective? So they're the two things that excite me, that I'm focused on. I'm not going to give too much away at the moment, because to be honest, still finding my feet in terms of, as I said, discrete experiments and so forth like that. But hopefully we can report on it soon enough over the next couple of months or 6 months.
Amazing. In 1943, Maslow came up with the hierarchy of needs. And for some reason,
Mm.
no one updated it yet. But if I had to, I'd add two things on the bottom. I'd add Wi-Fi and I'd
Yep.
add battery power. Those, you know, before water and shelter, just give us some Wi-Fi and some battery power.
I can't
That'd
I
be
can't solve you the battery power thing, and it's not universal. I was in China a couple of weeks ago, and I had all my battery packs taken off me because they were illegal or something. I don't know. They weren't standard. I don't know, but battery power is, yes, absolutely. But again, battery power then goes. If we really solve battery power, then we get electric aircraft, don't we? We've got electric cars now that do 1,000 kilometers on a charge. But hopefully, maybe in the next, inshallah, 5 or 10 years, there's technology there that you've got enough charge and they'll load enough weight that they actually can go on aircraft. I don't know. So, but that's an exciting area. I mean, battery technology is just it's beating Moore's law, isn't it? I mean, it's the rapid pace of battery technology is huge.
amazing. Have you heard of an author called Daniel Priestley by any chance? I think he's also Australian. He's from down under.
What was one of his books?
So you've got a book called The Key Person of Influence, another one called Oversubscribed.
I've heard of oversubscribed.
Yes, so Oversubscribed is one of his
Couldn't link it
books.
back to the author though. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've watched Diary of a CEO, the podcast, but I think he's
Yes.
the most
Yes.
repeated
Yes.
guest on Diary of a CEO. Like he's come back 6 times. That's how popular his
Oh.
but he
I
some
hope
of the
he's
stuff.
hope he's charging appearance fee.
Yeah, exactly. But I actually think you'd really enjoy his perspectives because his perspective on AI is similar to yours, a little bit different. I think he's releasing a book on it coming in the coming months. I was with him a couple of weeks ago. But just there's the perspective of not just rushing in and going all in. I found that really interesting, saying 90% of CEOs aren't seeing an ROI. But I think it's because they're
No.
not trying to solve practical, like tangible things with like smart goals. They're just sort of layering it on top of everything and hoping for the best. And
Well,
it's
look,
just not,
you've had a corporate life. You've seen the good and the bad with corporate life as
Mhm.
well. Sometimes you need to uh, be seen to do something for the sake of doing something. To be frank, and there's a big proportion of companies, unfortunately, out there who do that. The second sort of group is let's get on the bandwagon. Where you have these digital companies as an example that I've been working with for many years, and I'm sure there's examples of this outside the industry, but they've been an e-commerce company or an m-commerce company or something, and there's nothing wrong with them. They provide excellent solutions, and now they've become an AI company, and it's like, why? And I said, well, valuation, got to have it in
Yeah.
there, and so you've got that as well, and again this comes up into all the hype and so forth as well. So some of it, some of the pursuit of this is very misplaced for all the wrong reasons as I've talked about.
Mm.
I still think there are, and as a consequence of that, you have, as an example, the MIT studies that are coming out now and so forth that are quoting, we're spending all this money, but we're not seeing much return. And I think there'll be more of that coming out where there's disappointment. I've thrown a whole heap of money. I've set up, think about the e-commerce boom 20 years ago. It was like, Jesus, I've got to have a storefront. I've got to do something e-commerce. I was Walmart and I was shops, and now I've got to do something. And so you set up a massive team, you throw a whole heap of money at it, and the results, particularly for more established companies, have been, if you look back 20 years, have been horrendous. They're all got their act together now, but the first decade was just, and that contributed to the dot-com bust, that everyone thought
Mm.
they could set up an e-commerce store within 2 seconds and spend a fortune and make money, and it simply wasn't the case. So you're sort of going through that again, where they're just going, you're seeing a lot of people just throw a stash of money, and you see that even with the dot-com companies like Facebook. They're paying 120 million a year for some developers and coders, and that'll all come back and bite them eventually. I mean, it's just completely unsustainable. But at the end of the day, as I said, there's that corner which is just insatiable in terms of money and wanting to be doing that. You have to extract from that and so forth, and come and say, what's the real value? Let's not get caught up in the hype. Let's just try to get a few things that actually work, because we do believe that it will make a difference. I'll give you an example. We do 230 flights a day. We've come up from 130 since I first started, so a year and a half, almost doubled. We'll be 300, 350 flights in the next year or two a day. It doesn't sound like much, but that's a hell of a lot. That's a
Yeah.
hell of a lot. And we're not a Delta or American. I completely accept, but that's a lot. And our trajectory as we go to 100 planes, it's just you're adding 50 or 100 flights a year on year. That's a lot. Just to give an example, September alone this month, we have 32% extra capacity year on year in terms of growth. So coming back to AI, what we want to do is in our IOCC, our Operational Control Center, when weather hits Jeddah or what have you, or there's an event, we can model that event and we can give our controllers within the IOCC scenarios to say, well, you could do this, you could do that. And that is a tool that is on top of their own decision making to either reinforce their decisions or give them options. Okay,
Mm.
it's not about replacing people. It's about
Yeah.
synthesizing data and providing more tangible options that the controllers can then say, okay, didn't think of that. I'll do that, or no, we'll stick with the plan because there's other things that we haven't modeled or what have you. So it's that decision support thing. Then you go all the way through to I'm very bullish on customer service. As an example, I think that AI can cover off a lot of the calls and replace that with automated services and so forth, and save on overhead. As an example, in the MRO space, the predictive maintenance piece, I think that's a huge area in terms of, again, scenario building for the team. I would have loved to have a model at the start of the year when we were talking about trying to get through the year with all the engine changes and short supply, that multiple entities, including the OEMs, are putting data into an AI tool and then providing us with projections and advice and so forth that we could act on and that we could work on together. So I think there's a lot of that will start coming online as practical stuff that we'll see as a decent return that helps our business over the next 12 months.
Over the next 12 months, you're going to be shifting from a 75% domestic operation into more 50/50 domestic and international. How
Yeah.
do you see the sort of AOG support outside having to sort of get bolstered or change so that the performance doesn't suffer?
Yeah, I mean, this is always a problem because your outstations, you're in less control, and so you have your hubs, you're in total control. You then have the country, and just by de facto, it's in the country, so you've got decent control. And
Yeah.
then you go overseas, and it's like, oh, that's problematic. And I think it's multiple levels. If you're going to a place like, to be fair, Dubai, it's not an
Yeah.
issue.
No.
And it's not an issue on many fronts. You have some very reputable providers there. You have ourselves operating there and Saudi Air operating there at scale. We have 6, 7 flights a day from Riyadh alone. So you have that scale and a reputable base and so forth. There are a lot of places we're going to. Damascus on the 1st of October we start flying and so forth. The infrastructure is not there when it was all got destroyed. And
Wow.
so, we have to do daytime flights. We can't uplift fuel from there, et cetera, et cetera. It will get better over time, but on ground capability is problematic. We have to fly up our own engineer with the flight to sign off on the aircraft at the other end because there has been no engineers in Syria at this moment certified by our local authority. So, and that's the extreme. So you've got Dubai at one bookend and you've got Damascus at the other. Damascus will get better. Syria will get better over time. But we're having to do workaround solutions all the time to work through these. And there comes risk. You sit there and go, well, what happens if there's an AOG? Well, we'll probably find out at some stage. But we have contingency plans, we have plans and so forth. But obviously, accessibility to the market, capability in the market, equipment. Do you have access to a hangar? Let's say, God forbid, you had to do an engine change because of a bird strike or whatever. All of these things you need to think through. And so depending on where we go, we have confidence, just as if it was in our backyard, Dubai. And
Mm.
there's others that are actually getting special attention from us in terms of having our own staff there, having contingency plans in case something goes wrong in terms of equipment or spare parts or whatever the case may be. But I mean, that's just the luck of the draw. That's the risk you take. You go into some parts of the world that just aren't as equipped or as advanced. You have to factor that in terms of your operations anyway. I mean, that's a given in terms of what I've been doing, for my whole life in airlines, I suppose.
I visited the Ryanair operations and I was surprised to see 3 private jets parked up outside. And I was like,
Mm,
why have you got private jets there? And they were like, well, if there is an incident, then the engineer and the parts are on the jet, but they'll get there before the aeroplane lands. They land and they're
yes.
waiting on the stand with the part ready to go. Is that
Yeah.
practical solution that potentially you might see at Flyadeal?
You know, we haven't got to that scale yet. I would argue, and also their network is incredibly fragmented. And again, that's not a criticism. They have in Europe alone, they have I think over 60, maybe 70 bases now, and God knows how many routes. I mean, thousands and thousands of routes. So there's a lot more complexity than what we would have in our business. And so, you know, this is. I'm glad you saw that, because again, LCCs always get criticized about, oh, well, you know, you don't spend enough money on, you know, keeping the business going and so on. It's absolute garbage. What LCCs are really, really good at is focusing on the stuff that we do need to invest. And Ryanair and their fleet of private jets is a great example of that. They've had that for many years. People typically don't know about it, but I don't think we've got to that level of complexity yet. You know, the sheer vastness of the Ryanair network necessitates, I think, what they've set up, and it works for them. Not many other airlines have replicated that, to be fair, but you know, they've got such a focus on making sure of utilization and fleet availability and so forth. We have that too, but our network is not as complex. You know, as you said, you know, 75% of the network touches or capacity touches, you know, Saudi Arabia. So it's in our backyard. We have the capability to be able to do something. Now, in the coming years, as we expand and we fly all the way down to Southeast Asia and all the way up to Western Europe, particularly with our 330s and so forth, we may have a look at it. I don't know if we'll have a private fleet of jets. I'd love that if I could go to a meeting in one of them one day. But
That's what I was going to say. If
I
you
don't
can
think
like veto one.
yeah. But you know, you assess these things on a case by case basis. I don't think we would have that. But what we will be doing, and what we are doing, is investing in other areas. A good example, and you're more than welcome. It's probably not as big as the Ryanair IOCC, but we have a new multi-million-dollar IOCC opening up literally just behind me. Well overdue, but that will open up next month. And again, it's steroid size, in so much as we've built it for a fleet of 100 plus aircraft, even though we're only 41, 42 now. So we're future proofing, as an example, other certain areas such as the IOCC. So that's an investment now for long term over the next decade, to be able to run our fleets. And so, you know, that's the type of stuff that we do. But no private jets yet. But you've given me an idea.
There you go. That's what it's all about. Amazing, Stephen. I really enjoyed this, and I really look forward to the air show for us to be able to sort of bring it to life.
Well,
I think it's a dynamic conversation, and from my experience of a lot of these events, they're not always as dynamic. Let's be honest.
Not always. Yeah, the MRO, also the MRO events. I like the MRO events, by the way, but they're very serious people at MRO. Okay, it's just, and you're an engineer and you appreciate this. You know what engineers are mostly like, but you know, you go in, they're very serious, and you know, it's party hard later on, but yes, very, very serious, very focused type of events, which is not such a bad thing, to be honest. I mean, it's good, but there's a different flavor to these events, I suppose, more than anything else. And you and I haven't caught up in person for quite some time. We haven't crossed paths for, trying to think the last time we were there, but like,
I think it was
it was some event in Riyadh somewhere or something. I can't remember, but yeah, it's been some time. So I do look forward to it.
World Aviation Festival, I think last year. And
there you go.
And then we also had the aviation club with the DB9. Do you remember the Aston Martin that was parked up in the middle of the hall?
Geez, you got better memory than me. Yeah, oops, I should know. Yeah, that was beautiful. That was in the RAC club. Yes, I remember that now. Yeah, absolutely. The start of the year. Yeah, with Tony.
You had an event with them the other day, didn't you? It wasn't long ago. You were with the aviation club.
No, I got an event 5th of November. So I'm speaking. I did do a panel a couple of months ago at Norton Rose, so the lawyers, as part of that. But I'm doing not a speech, a fireside chat on the 5th of November, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, in London.
So that with Sarah, I'm guessing you're organising that with Abdesh and team.
I think so. Yes. Sarah's organising it. I don't know if she's the MC, but I think she probably will be. Yeah.
We just had an event with Declan Ryan, co-founder of Ryanair. So that was really quite eye-opening, interesting stuff. But yeah, amazing. Yeah. Well, look, we'll give you 15 minutes back in your diaries, 14 now, but I know how tight it can be. So yeah, take it away. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Take care, mate.